They wanna know what an American warrior is. Yeah. Anybody that served in the United States military honorably. Yeah.
Welcome, this is the American Warrior Radio Show. I'm Garen Cohn, an Air Force veteran, founder of AVET Project, and also an accredited claims agent before the VA, and your host. If you or someone you know has ever worn the uniform of the U.S. military, you're in the right place, American Warrior Radio Show. So grab a pen and paper and strap in, because we're about to launch this episode.
Yeah, American warrior. Okay, let's get it in for the women and servicemen. I came prepared and brought my game like ESPN.
American Warrior Radio Show's bumper and intro music is graciously provided by none other than war hero himself, Stephen Hobbs. Thank you, Stephen. Set the tone, my brother.
By the way, I keep the fams buzzing. I ain't worried about the outcome, the message gonna be clear. You can hate it or love it, but your freedom is still here.
Hello, everybody out there in American Warrior Radio Show land. We are so glad you joined us again for this episode, because this is some great information. As always, we effort to bring news and information that you can use for yourself or others that you know that may need it. And when we talk about the veteran community, we're also talking about active duty military. We have a very special guest today, somebody that AVET Project and Kim and I have come to know quite well. Wonderful woman, and she's got quite a story to tell. So I want to introduce her without any further delay, Leah Bucholz from Prestige Medical. Hi, Leah.
Hey, buddy. How are you doing? Thank you so much for the opportunity today.
Well, you lift my spirits every time I get a chance to speak to you, and I'm so glad we had an opportunity to discuss some things over the last NOVA conference that you were a sponsor at and also involved in. So thank you for that. And getting to know you a little bit better is how I want this episode to play out in the eyes and ears of our viewers, because they need to know you and what you offer as much as Kim and I have come to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, Leah, you've got a long history here, but just give us some general biography.
Sure. So I started out my career in the Army as a medic, as a healthcare specialist, combat medic, whatever way you want to roll it. I had some really great experiences. I was enlisted. I was a private. Went to airborne school, got to be in the 82nd Airborne Division, which was a blast and set the stage for my military career of discipline and kind of how to do things, I'd like to say, the right way. Great prestigious unit. Deployed to Iraq for about 15 months during the earlier parts of, probably during the troop surge, which was, I think, 06 to 08. Continued honing those medic skills, and I decided I wanted to go to the Army's PA program and become a physician assistant and further my career. So I did that, and I served in the 101st, at Fort Campbell, and then I was in special operations for a while as part of 5th Special Forces Group, which I enjoyed tremendously. Got a lot of cool experiences, got to go to different parts of the world. I served about almost 14 years on active duty and transitioned to the reserves because I, started getting older and having children. And, it was a lot to balance. And so
Let me interrupt for just a second, because as a female in today's Army, you must have faced some special challenges with that alone versus all of your male counterparts.
Yeah, there were definitely some challenges. I think the Army has done a really great job, and the military has done a really great job of bringing in new policies to try to support not only women, but men too. I think there's a new paternity leave thing they're doing for guys, which I think is great. Balancing what is always number one, which is, suppressing and killing the enemy and keeping America safe is always, that's the most important thing. And all these other things that we can do to take care of soldiers or service members, it is definitely helpful to keep the morale up as long as it stays in context of continuing that mission, right? So from when I started until, I hit, the later parts of my careers, I saw a huge change. It was tough, but I think fortunately the demographic I was in, there were a lot of women that had physical toughness. And so, it was a lifestyle.
Physical and mental, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You have to be.
Yeah.
Talk about, so you're a Mustang. What's your current rank? Because you're still in the reserves, right?
Yeah. So I don't talk about that a whole lot, but yes. So I'm gonna retire next year from the reserve. So I'm hitting my 20th year.
Congratulations.
So thank you. Yeah. So I'm I got promoted to major. That's probably what I will retire as. Because I was an E6, going up through the ranks. So I did about 10 years on each side of the coin, I guess.
Well, and you're a Mustang, and which I think a lot of our viewers have a special appreciation for that. Somebody that's seen both sides of the fence, as you were talking about, coming up in the enlisted ranks, furthering your education, continuing to serve, and now going to be retiring as an officer. That's that says a lot about you and your character, particularly. And again, not going back to tailhook days, but it's still not easy for women. And we can talk about the situation as well. They're still trying to develop the means to deal with and properly address issues specific to female veterans. Did you have that same experience while you were on active duty?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I did a really cool interview with University of Texas about 2 years ago about women in war, and it kind of we went over a lot of these things too. And it was for some historical stuff that they're archiving, and these were a lot of those tough subjects that were brought up. And of course, sexual harassment, sexual assault is a thing. It's a very real thing. Did people make passes at me in my whole career? Especially when I was younger. I'm getting old now. Of course, that did happen, right? But I think that happens in the corporate world too, right? So that's something that I think it's a social issue in the world, right? The military is not exempt from that. When those things happen to me, I think early in my earlier years, I would just kind of like laugh it off or brush it off, or, just really try to just fit in. I don't know that I would do that now, or if it was my daughter, I might call. I don't think anybody's going to come up to me as a major and make a pass at me now at 40, years old. Right. Without,
I hope not, because you're happily married anyway, but
yeah, but when you're a 23 or 24-year-old buck sergeant, that's a lot different when you've got power differentials and things like that. But I think I always handled it well. Could I have handled it better? And who knows, maybe, but I kept my nose clean. I brushed people off and I kept it moving. So,
well, given that history of yours coming up in the enlisted ranks, again, everybody, as a female, there are special challenges. Would you recommend military service to maybe not your daughter, but what about young folks that are planning a career?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I think absolutely I would, but there are some things that I would advise women to think about, like their family planning, right? So for example, if someone joins and they're in their 20s and they do all these things and they want to have a family, right? The military has made great strides in supporting family members and doing things. But you also have to remember that you got to have a family care plan. And if you get called up, are you comfortable leaving your child with somebody else for an extended period, a year, maybe more? And so those are some of those difficult things that I think for people in general, women included, obviously women, but dads too, have to think about, and it's not a career for everybody. Right. And so for me, if I had never had kids, I would have stayed on active duty I'd still be on active duty right now, probably, right? Because I loved the military so much, it just became a lot to balance. And there are many moms and dads out there that balance and do all of those things, and I commend them. but the military provided me so much, right? They gave me an education. They gave me a good job. If I was, a mechanic, it might be hard. And mechanics is a great job too. But let's say I was a administrative person. I had this awesome job that I could transition into. And so I just looked at it and I said, you know what, I'm going to just provide some stability and do it this way. And that's what I did.
And you mentioned the education opportunities alone. I'm not trying to do a recruiting commercial,
No.
but that is a big part of today's Army and the Army that you grew up in.
Yeah, I had no college before. I think I took 3 credit hours of college, at 19 years old. I mean, I might have had English 1 or something, but all that, I have a master's degree. All of that education came from the military, right? So taking classes after, at the end of the day online, right? Or, if I had time and I could take an evening class, depending on the mission, the unit I was in, if we had the bandwidth to do it. And then the military put me through that PA program, and I still got a GI Bill, right? That I didn't even use, and I gave to my kids. So, I mean, that's amazing.
A lot of advantages, and you took full advantage of every opportunity you had, but you obviously are a pretty sharp gal to begin with, because you wouldn't have advanced through your enlisted career as quickly as you did, and certainly wouldn't have been accepted into a prestigious, program like a physician assistant for the Army without having a whole lot on the ball. So later in your career, you were juggling having a family, and maybe, like you said, if you didn't have children, you should be on active duty. But you've branched out. Now tell us a little bit about, we know your plans to retire finally. Thank you for your service. But tell us what led you to be the founder and chief executive officer of Prestige Medical. And then we'll go into what all that means.
Sure. So yeah, when I was leaving, well, not just leaving active duty, but my last few years as a PA, I really focused and found this home in my heart of when veterans were, or when service members were retiring, or they were separating, or whatever. There was this gap in people really documenting and getting their stuff in order so that they could file VA disability claims. And now I didn't know that side quite yet, right? But I could see, we're doing their separation physicals, and I'm like, hey, you've got a lot of stuff you never documented your whole career. Why don't you take this 2807, which is, you probably know, the report of medical history, write everything down, right? And then come in and let's do like 3 items at a time for the next 3 or 4 months. Like, just come in every couple of weeks and we're going to really document each one of these things to make sure it's recorded in your record correctly, right? So that was kind of my first, we were doing MEBs too. And so I kind of got some of that, understanding that side of the process for medical separations. And so then when I transitioned to the civilian sector, I was working in an urgent care that it was a brand new urgent care, and they weren't very busy. So I was sitting around bored, and things don't happen good when I'm bored, because I can't be bored, right? So I start looking, and I'm like, maybe we should bring in some contract VA examinations in here, because the clinic's not busy. So we start, I work out getting the contracts with two of the 3 big CMP companies for the VA.
What is that? I know a lot of us know, but
so sorry. So compensation and pension exams. So many of you, I won't say which ones I was dealing with, but many of you know LHI, VES, QTC, right? Those are the big 3. So I was able to negotiate contracts for the clinic I was working in to be contract examiners for a couple of those organizations.
Which takes certification on your part in order to be able to deliver those services.
Right. So we got those, and then I trained in all the modules to be able to do that CMP work, compensation and pension exam. For the listeners, you guys, when you file a claim and you go in to see the doctor, and they go over all your ailments and do the DBQ, disability benefit questionnaire, send it up to the rater. That's basically what I was doing, was that CMP examination portion. So I did that for a period of time. Go ahead.
I just wanted to back up for another moment here. You started to deliver this type of service while you're on active duty, two other active duty members as they were separating. You mentioned medical evaluation boards and so on and so forth. Was the TAP or transition assistance program an active part of your daily life while you were in that scope?
So not really. And so and I know you're clear on this, but let me just back up one step and say that when I started doing the VA CMP exams, that was post-service, right? But the helping the veterans with their separation physicals, doing the IDAS process, the medical boards, PEB stuff, that was on active duty, right? And that's a big part of every active duty Army PA's job because we're managing the force. So I have all these.
I didn't know that, but that's interesting. I just spoke to a young man who's separating this morning. Spoke to him this morning. He's separating in August, and he's going through a situation where his buddies in the chow hall are sitting there trying to write a list of disabilities that he can claim in his BDD, benefits delivery on discharge claim. But you're saying as an active participant, the GIs would come in to see you and you would go through their medical jacket, their service treatment record, and identify those things that might be chronic in nature?
So it's a little bit different. So with the BDD, we didn't have a part in BDD, right? So in those situations, when they're going through the SFL TAP and they go and they have a checklist of things, part of that is going to see a VSO, right? They're going to see a VSO who's going to help them file their claim. Now, what I would do separately from that process, and not every medical provider does this, I would say, in fact, most say, get out of here, the VA will handle that for you, right? That's the reality. And a lot of them is because they're busy, their time, they don't have time for these types of appointments, or they just, whatever. Part of what we did was the separation physicals. Now you're still going to have your VA exams for whatever you claim, but part of separating from the military is doing a separation physical. And that physical is evidence for your BDD or for your VA claim. Right?
Sure.
And so I would use that physical to then schedule appointments based on the things that they're talking about.
Nice. Did everyone in your occupation doing that, or was that something that you just saw a need for and knew you needed to make that happen?
The Army, I can't speak for all the branches, but I'm pretty sure it's the same way now. Every service member that's separating is supposed to have a separation physical, period. Right. Now, the lengths at which the providers go into scheduling follow-ups for those issues and those things, it's all provider dependent. I
want the viewer that's watching and learning from this episode right now to understand if it's not them that's looking to separate service, maybe it's their brother, sister, father, who knows.
Okay.
That they have an avenue to go through. When they go to do that separation physical, you're identifying the items that might be systemic illnesses, that might have long-ranging effects. And to know at that point that this woman right here, people, is telling you need to do the follow-ups to make sure that it does have that substantive, grounded nature.
Yeah, you do. And I think at a minimum, getting that 2807, right, which is the report of medical history, that there are two main forms that get done on the separation physical. It's also the same as the entrance physical. It's the same forms. It's a report of medical history and a report of medical examination. They go hand in hand. One's filled out by the veteran, one's filled out by the doctor, right? Even if you have short time to get out or you can't get these appointments done, the most important thing, in my opinion, that they can do is fill out that report of medical history and put everything on there, right? Even if they don't have follow-ups for them, if they're documenting they've got migraines, they've got heartburn, they've got anxiety, tinnitus, all of these things, and they're checking the blocks, guess what goes in the top right-hand corner of that form? The date. And if that date is within those dates on your DD 214, right? Those are active duty dates. Even if you haven't followed up for those headaches, there's a written record that you reported headaches when you're separating, right? Exactly. So that to me is the most important thing.
Well, my producer we just got viewer chimed in here with the question, what if someone is already 100% with the VA as a reservist? How the MEB works, would the soldier need new evaluations? Kind of getting the gist of that.
So that's a good question. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, no, we were more on the military, the active duty side a moment ago, but let's just throw that in there since they're asking. If they're 100% already as a reservist and there's an active MEB, what's your understanding as to how that's processed?
So the first thing I would say is that when you go through the MEB, what they look at for separation purposes, so you're always going to get your VA stuff, right? But what they look at for the condition that is unfitting, right?
That's the word, isn't it?
So the condition that is unfitting. So you could have back pain, ankle pain, migraines, but they're all fitting conditions. And I don't want to go into a rabbit hole because I feel like I'm going to overwhelm the conversation, but there's a regulation, just like 38 CFR, just like VA policies. There's a regulation called AR 40, or not. I'm going to have to come back to this. I think it's 40-501. Anyways, there's a, it's like the medical Bible that says this is fitting, this is not fitting. This meets retention standards, this doesn't. Okay, so if you have a condition that doesn't meet retention standards, that's the unfitting condition. Okay, you can have a bunch of other conditions and still be fitting, which is why you can still serve with 100% VA disability in the reserves.
Exactly.
But once it makes you unqualified to do specific things, like let's say carry a firearm, right? You are now in the funnel for MEB. Okay.
I think that's a pretty good answer, honestly.
Yeah. Now, but that condition has to be related to service. So this will be the last thing I say on it because I don't want to go in a wormhole. But that reservist who's trying to separate, if the condition that's unfitting is not in the line of duty or is not one of their service-connected disabilities, for example, they're probably not going to get medically retired, right?
Lot of variables here. Line of duty.
Yeah, there are.
Everybody should know something happened to you while you were on the job or while it was determined you weren't at fault for it. In other words, you weren't riding a motorcycle, getting in an accident, you didn't have your helmet on. That's going to be totally different. But line of duty determinations are important for a whole slew of reasons, right, but particularly when you're going to separate. Okay, so you have so much information, so much knowledge.
I'm sorry.
I love it. I can't wait to pick your brain more on the follow-up episode, but I just want to, so you're on the civilian side now. You spoke briefly about how you turned this doc in the box into a CNP opportunity. You became a CNP examiner.
Right.
How long did you do that? Did you enjoy that type of work? What was it like?
I did it for about a year, and that was also while I started getting busier with Prestige, which we'll get into. But basically, when I started getting so busy with Prestige, I really started to focus on that. But while I was doing the CNP stuff, I was learning a lot. What I will tell you is that what I learned in that capacity is probably about 1% of what I know now, just because the education and training that you get is like, hey, watch these modules. Like nobody really came in. I never saw an examiner come in and teach me how to do examinations, right? It was like, watch these videos, veteran shows up, fill out this DBQ, you know? So there was a lot of research and development on my part post that, you know, throughout that whole thing to kind of get to where I am now.
And that's an important point also, because a lot of guys and gals that are going in for their CNP examination, their comp and pen examination after having filed a claim, or maybe they filed for an increase, they're not fully aware that the person on the caregiver, the medical professional, may or may not be well versed in that particular area of medicine. And it's okay if they're general, but what if a situation arises where it's a very specific, say a cancer condition, something very specific? I know all of you, particularly PAs, are well versed in so many different things. What happens then if Sergeant Joe comes in and quickly determines the person sitting across from him really doesn't have a clue. He may have a better understanding of his condition. What can a person do with the C&P examiner based on your experience?
So that's tough because you will get a lot of variability, and that the M21 prescribes what type of practitioners can do what type of examinations, right? And so when it comes to cardiac exams, cancer exams, you could have an orthopedic exam and it's done by an OBGYN, right? You could have anything that's a general medicine person can do all of those, right? So if they don't like their outcome, or they get an outcome that they don't believe is, another thing is I've seen somebody have a medical opinion from an oncologist, and then they see a nurse practitioner who says no, but their oncologist is saying this, right? And that's when they come to amazing people like you to use the tools in the toolkit to, fight that administratively. I have seen veterans be successful with calling the bureau office and saying, I want this exam, before they're adjudicated, right? Like if it's still open and they had a really bad exam, I've seen veterans successful with calling the White House hotline and saying, I want a new exam because of this, this, and this. And I've seen them get them. But again, that's a tight window to do that. And I don't know if it's always successful.
Well, it's just kind of an aside, but I appreciate your comment on that, because it is an important aspect of the whole claims process if somebody doesn't think they're being dealt with fairly by a medical practitioner. But okay, so you parlayed this wonderful military career into prestige medical. You were a C&P examiner, so you've literally been on all the way around this process. Tell me, before we get into the next segment, because I know people are going to want to stay tuned to get to some of the meat and potatoes of what Prestige Medical offers, but how did that come about again? I mean, it's kind of a natural progression, but when did you decide, I'm here at this doc in the box doing C&P exams? There's got to be more.
So I was approached by a few people in my community, by some attorneys that said, hey, do you think you could do these narrative opinions separately? And I had never really thought about it. And so I said, okay, sure, I'll try. And, I started doing them, and they were a lot of great feedback, a lot of success. I was able to do it at a price that was a fraction of what some of the people in the industry are charging. And so it just kind of caught on and grew we're in year 4 right now. So year over year, it's just gotten busier, and the word of mouth,
Sure. And you are offering a service that is quite specialized, actually. And we'll get into that in a moment as we go on to segment 2. So everybody out there in American Warrior Radio Show land, please stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss what Leah has to share. And the more, as I've said, Kim and I have gotten to know her, the more we want you to get to know her and the products and services that her Prestige Medical offers. So until next time, just remember, don't forget, thank a vet.
Hi everyone, it's Garen Cohn with American Warrior Radio. I'm here with my good friend Christian. We're here to deliver a very important message about a crisis in our land.
Suicide prevention, more specifically, veteran suicide prevention.
22 a day are taking their own lives. This must stop. This can't continue. If you or someone you know is contemplating suicide, please know that God has tomorrow planned for you. Don't take your own life, and just remember, suicide is a permanent solution
to a temporary problem.